Action.
Again, everybody, thanks for being here. We're privileged today for our Tuesday with Jodi Barnes. And I can sense among you that there is a fan club here already or some connection with Jodi. We were pleased to have her with us last year. And so glad to have her come back. Jodi made a mistake last year. She says after she's finished talking, I also have a presentation on. And that's how we get her back again this year, really thrilled. So I'm hoping she's going to say after today, I also have a presentation on. And I can do this for next year as well. Jodi is Heritage Trust Archaeology at South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, a position she's held since 2021. I love the description on her Facebook or some page that she has of what she does. She's an archaeologist, researcher, writer, and educator who strives to learn about the past and share that knowledge with the public. And that's what we're privileged to be able to do today. She shares all the hard work that she has done. She previously served as the Associate Research Professor and Station Archaeologist at the Arkansas Archaeological Survey. She also was a staff archaeologist for the South Carolina Department of Archives and History. She has her bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of South Carolina and a PhD from American University in anthropology. I love some of the areas of research that she's done, and I just grabbed this. One of her archaeological works was at an Italian prisoner of war camp in Arkansas from the Second World War. A fascinating subject. I don't know if it fascinates me to be able to do that kind of work at a POW camp. And then also working with tidal rice fields here in the South Carolina area and research there. She is a recipient of, and I have to give this because it's my namesake, the Gordon R. Willey Prize for Excellence in Archaeological Research, Archaeological Division of the American Anthropological Association. Somebody has a name like mine, and when that happens, they're so rare. We're really pleased to have today with us Jodi Barnes speaking on archaeology of Georgetown County Foodways. Join me in welcoming Jodi.
Thank you for that introduction, Bob. It's always great to be here at the Georgetown County Library. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you all for braving the cold to get out here today. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and maybe yours too, food. Eating is a cultural universal. We eat to survive. We'll pretty much eat anything that won't kill us. But food is not just nutrition or deliciousness. It is also history and culture. Anthropologists talk about foodways as the shared ways that people think about, procure, distribute, preserve, and consume foods. So said another way, whether we eat our dinner from a styrofoam container or a shared plate, prepare it on a gas range or a fire pit, and eat it in a dining room or the driver's seat of our car, we can see culture in how, where, and what we eat. As archaeologists, we learn about foodways from a variety of sources. We may find projectile points or fragments of cooking pots, canning jars, or tablewares that give us information about how people stored, prepared, and ate foods. We also find animal bones or charred seeds through specialized analyses that tell us what people ate. Foodways are also seen in landscapes. Here in Georgetown County, people utilize the land and water for rice agriculture or hunting grounds. They planted kitchen gardens, gathered wild plants, raised livestock, hunted fish, crab, oyster, and more. So we can think about foodways at various scales, from the landscape to the household, and from the campsite to the plantation, and from the land and from the town to the larger county. I generally work at the Yawkey Wildlife Center, a 24,000-acre heritage preserve owned and managed by the Department of Natural Resources. So, how many of you visited Yawkey? Good. I see some people without their hands raised. And my friends. So we have some new things coming up that involve archaeology, so we have to add that to your list. It's made up of 3 islands, north, south, and islands located at the mouth of Winyah Bay. Today I'll talk about some of the archaeology we've been doing there, but I'll also expand it to Georgetown County more broadly because it gives us a bigger picture of the origins of our low country there. Georgetown County comprises about 815 square miles of diverse landscapes along the coast. Today's vegetation reflects the effects of clearing, agriculture, and other historic land use practices, but prior to these changes, the vegetation consisted of southern mixed pine and oak forests, cypress swamps, fresh and saltwater marshes, and intertidal beach. And it's situated around Winyah Bay at the confluence of the Sampit, the Black, the Waccamaw, the Great Peavey, and the North Santee rivers in the Atlantic Ocean. And so the location at the convergence of these highways of Native American and early historic settlement make it an important location where the Winyah, the Santee, the Waccamaw, the Peavey, and other tribes utilize the different soils, plant, and animal species to build shelter, weave baskets, make tools, and attain food. So archaeologists have learned that about 9,500 years ago, when the mammoth and mastodon went extinct, indigenous people adopted the atlatl and hunted smaller game such as white-tailed deer. Stone tool makers changed the size and the shape of their tools and made side and corner-notched points. And these archaic period Indians communities were nomadic. They lived in base camps and moved from place to place on a seasonal round of hunting and foraging of many kinds of plant foods. And the waterways of Georgetown County were part of a seasonal circuit where they visited different regions to attain food and raw materials. And this guaranteed a variety of meat, fish, nuts, and wild plant foods in their diets and raw material for tool production. And around 6,500 years ago, these nomadic people camped along coastal creeks near Earl's Inlet and Pawleys Island and feasted on hard-shell clams, Atlantic ribbed mussels, and stout razor clams. And archaeologist Chester DePrutter found few artifacts in these bins indicating that people created them before they adopted ceramics. Bands of native people came together, camped on the entire tidal creeks, gathered clams and mussels, and roasted them over hot coals as their seasonal feasts. Around 3,400 years ago, people began to camp on Minim Island in the broad marshes and mudflats of the Santee Delta, shortly after the first establishment of viable oyster beds in the area. In the late spring and early summer, they procured fishes and oysters, and in the fall and winter, they gathered hickory nuts and persimmons for feasts and rituals where they sometimes buried their kin. The resulting shell mound was a sacred space where native people practiced foodways and made a connection to their ancestors. For these feasts, cooks likely roasted oysters over baked clay objects. They fired silt balls of a variety of shapes and sizes and placed them in the ground. They built a fire to heat them, and when the fire died down, they added raw meat, mussels, oysters, or clams, and covered it with leaves to cook. In other places, native people used rocks for the same purpose, but the Carolina coast, where stone was in limited supply, cooks used clay as a workaround. About 2,500 years ago, hunters adopted the bow and arrow, and people started gathering clay and made pottery for food preparation and storage. In some places, archaeologists have found evidence of gardening during this period as people domesticated some of the wild plants they had gathered for centuries, like chenopodium, squash, marsh elder, and sunflowers, but there's no evidence of that in this part of South Carolina. They resolved, but I would suggest we just haven't found that evidence. I would say that people have these plants here. And part of the way, because they're growing these, if you know anything about these plants, these are small seeds. And so as they start to incorporate this into their diets, they need containers to put them in, right? There you can't cook plant foods with baked clay objects, right? So they resolve, potters made vessels with local clays and hardened them around campfires. Cooks use these fire-hardened containers repeatedly for soups, stews, and other one-pot meals prepared with black drum or spotted turtle. About 1,000 years ago, indigenous peoples brought corn from Mesoamerica to the southeastern United States. It was part of the large-scale social changes as people shifted from mixed gardening and foraging to full-time agriculture. With this advent of agriculture and increased populations, Southeastern Indians increasingly lived in chieftain societies led by hereditary leaders. In Georgetown County, people generally lived in farming settlements along rivers to take advantage of the fertile soils of the natural levees and visited Mississippian towns like Calvin and Seaweed Town, where they sit with their centrally placed plazas and broken mounds. The archaeologists have found corn cob and pressed pottery, so ceramic pottery decorated with corn cobs at 2 sites, and they found corn kernels at 2 sites along the Waccamaw River, but both date around 1520. So there's a long time between the arrival of corn in the southeast and when we're seeing it archaeologically. I suspect, again, that people had corn agriculture, but we haven't done enough archaeology to find it. So in 16 so the corn that archaeologists have found, the 2 corn kernels that archaeologists have found, date to around the time of Spanish explorers. In 1664, English explorer William Hilton described the cornfields in the area as having stalks as large as he had seen anywhere. So we know they're growing corn here. With the arrival of Spanish explorers like Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón and Hernando de Soto, they brought pigs and plants like peaches, citrus fruit, and sugar that originated in South or Southeast Asia. And this was one of the ways that transformed low country foodways. Right? So keep in mind, like, pigs were not here until De Soto brought them. Like, wild hogs are a result of the Soto expedition. So these explorers also provide accounts of native foodways and bring foodstuff. For example, in 1701, John Lawson described a food he saw at a Santee Indian's cabin. He noted peas, beans, chickpeas, corn, barbecued peaches, and peach bread made into loaves. So if you remember that those explorers brought peaches, and so archaeologists have found preserved peach pits that date to the early to mid 16th century. So in 100 years, Native Americans adopted the first Eurasian domesticates, and it spread across eastern North America. And peach pits are found at Minim Island, indicating that people were continuing to visit that island and adopted the fruit into their foodways. Lawson also noted that Santee Indians had barbecued venison, which could be seen as one of the early origins of South Carolina barbecue. The Congaree also ate peaches, blackberry, corn, chinkapin, and hickory nuts, according to explorers. They ground the hickory nuts between 2 stones, sifted it, and used the meal to thicken their venison broth, similar to what we might do with flour to make a roux for gumbo. And gumbo is a West African word for okra, which is a plant domesticated in West Africa and used to thicken stews. It was brought to South Carolina as part of the transatlantic slave trade, which brought people of diverse African cultures from various geographic locations on the West African coast and West Central Africa to the Americas. Newspaper advertisements for slave markets and runaways regularly referred to people from the Gullah country. This region, where large numbers of people were captured, was colonized by the Portuguese in the 16th century and termed Angola or Angola. The people who lived in this large expanse of land were separated from their families and shipped to the Caribbean in the Americas. And this concept of Angola artificially unified under one label an array of unrelated groups of people from widely varying environments, from deserts to rainforests. So Gullah Geechee heritage is rooted in a diverse mix of cultural traditions and languages of people with diverse Foodways traditions. Around 3,000 years ago, West African farmers in the floodplains of the inland Niger Delta domesticated a hardy species of rice, and it became a dietary staple of the empires of Ghana and Mali from the 11th to the 16th century. Along the coast, African farmers perfected methods of growing rice in marine estuaries by controlling water levels with canals, embankments, gates, and hollow logs. These rice farmers were brought to the Caribbean and the Carolinas to utilize their knowledge of rice production to turn the marsh and swamps into commodities. So on low country plantations more broadly, the cultural traditions of enslaved Africans mixed and fused in new combinations from the interactions among those in bondage and between Africans, Native Americans, and European settlers, creating new Gullah Geechee cultures and new Foodways traditions. Moving forward in time, Britain granted the territory, the land that Native Americans farmed, hunted, and gathered for centuries to the lord proprietors to extend the empire westward. They granted the land to settlers who established a province of large plantations owned by wealthy aristocrats, which were worked by white indentured servants and enslaved Indians and Africans. And these maps do not align, but they give examples of the way the landscape was transformed with plantations that lined Georgetown County rivers and became the places where our Foodways traditions grow. So I've chosen to illustrate the rest of this talk with paintings by Gullah Geechee painter Jonathan Reed and other artists. Too frequently, when we talk about slavery and African-American life, the tone is bleak and dark, as it should be when we are talking about enslaved people. But Green utilizes both the aesthetics of Gullah Geechee heritage and the abstraction of human figures seen in the work of artists like Pablo Picasso and Diego Rivera, creating more vibrant depictions of Gullah Geechee culture and everyday life. And I want that vibrancy to come across in this discussion of Foodways. So early European settlers owned cattle, and those cattle and the cowboys, mostly enslaved Africans who raised them, were the early landscape engineers. Their experiences with the landscape, particularly the small stream floodplains frequented by cattle, facilitated the emergence of large-scale production of rice for the global market. Cattle raising was part of an annual cycle in which people burned the rice fields in the winter to improve forage, rounded up the beef cattle for slaughter in the fall, and butchered and salted the meat. In some of the Works Progress Administration interviews with formerly enslaved people, they talk of drying beef like turkey or cooking it whole in a pit like you would a hog. So even your grilled steak or your barbecue has roots in colonial history. By 1840, enslaved people produced over 36 million bushels of rice in Georgetown County. 3 times the amount produced in Charleston. Enslaved rice growers constructed an intricate system of dams, dikes, ditches, floodgates, and drains as part of their tidal rice system, and they were also responsible for harvesting, threshing, bundling, husking, winnowing, and later cooking the rice. And this rice was a big part of enslaved people's diets, while its production resulted in the wealth that filled Georgetown County. Gullah Geechee cooks prepared meals for the planters and their families, as well as other enslaved people on the plantation. Gullah cooks used the ingredients available to them, including rice, seafood, and vegetables, to create flavorful dishes that were both nutritious and satisfying. And not surprisingly, rice plays a starring role in gumbos and purlus. During recent research by the Santee Delta Project team between North and South Santee rivers, archaeologists found a grain of rice, which isn't too surprising, but they also found millet and peach pits at a settlement where enslaved people lived. We expect to find rice, but the millet was a surprise. Descended from a wild West African grass, millet was domesticated more than 4,000 years ago, and it is one of many plants that were brought from West Africa, like okra, cowpeas, black-eyed peas, collard greens, and watermelon. And those peach pits that they found show the adoption of Native American foodstuffs in enslaved people's diet too. They likely prepared these ingredients in colonial-ware pots. Enslaved Native American or African women and their Gullah Geechee descendants made pottery that archaeologists call colonial-ware. These unglazed, low-fired earthenwares have roots in West African and Native American potting traditions and were used for preparing daily one-pot meals. Some of you might have heard about this research before, but it's a little different. On South Island, George Ford divided the northern part of that land into 200-foot lots where planters established summer homes to escape the heat and mosquitoes of their tidal rice plantations around 1817. And by 1854, the planters from nearby plantations like Hume, Belle Isle, and Daisy Bank resorted to the island where there was quite a village. The archaeology team found transfer print and banded ceramics, French champagne bottle seals, and kale and pipe bowls at the location of one of the summer homes, giving us a glimpse into the lives of the planter families, and as well as the Gullah Geechee cooks and boatmen who cared for their everyday needs. Like the enslaved people on plantations, they received rations that they provided for their dietary needs on their own time. They often kept chickens, fish, hunted wild game, and cultivated kitchen gardens to supplement their diets. In 1812, Iori, who had a summer home on North Island, wrote his journal, "Boatmen went early to fish, having clams, therefore only shrimps wanting." Archaeological studies of fishing indicate that it was a communal practice in which people used fishing techniques originating in West Africa. Children and women performed much of the fishing activities. They used small pots and nets. Pots, also called traps, consisted of cage-like structures that capture fish on the ocean floor, like those we use for crabbing today. Nets include small hand nets, but also seines, which were fabric nets with weights that people placed horizontally in the water and dragged ashore. And this technique required cooperation by groups of individuals, and when people shared the labor, they also shared the catch. After the Civil War, many people stayed on the Sea Islands and took every opportunity to purchase land. On South Island, in those former summer homes, deed and census research shows that around 1877, Gullah Geechee men and women, including Isaac Hume, a carpenter and owner of a fishing sloop, Maria Smith, a milliner, Edmund Ford, a fisherman, and Robert Ellison, a shooter captain, bought land in what became a fishing village. Some of these Gullah Geechee landowners divided their land and sold it or rented it to other African Americans like Esau Lawrence, a cook, Humsey Vanderhorst, a fisherman, Thomas Alston, a cook, Jonas Brown, a fisherman, and his wife Nina was a midwife. The families hunted, fished, and gardened to provide their everyday meals. And there was a market in northern cities for duck, shad, sturgeon, and oysters. And by 1900, Edmund Ford is a fish dealer. He and Maria Smith also acquired land in Georgetown, building a system of trade networks that connected South Island to the bustling town of Georgetown. In the areas near the Gullah Geechee households, archaeologists found bone net, needle, cast net weights, and lead scraps, indicating that they made their own fishing tools there. The team also found bones of deer, pig, cow, turtle, squirrel, raccoon, duck, and fish like gar, sturgeon, mullet, catfish. We also identified acorn, gourd rind, mulberry, poke, and wild grape seeds, providing additional information about the foodways of people living in the fishing village. The acorn could reflect livestock feed as descendants talk about, a descendant talks about his grandfather raising hogs, and pig bones are part of our faunal assemblage. The butchered, I'm so sorry, yeah. I'll show you this for a second. The butchered deer and hogs made me think of barbecue, which is a rich amalgamation of African, Native American, and European foodways, where enslaved men were frequently the pitmasters on southern plantations. Gullah Geechee people frequently planted mulberry trees around their homes, and they made jam. The families may have canned the wild grape and bright little mulberry fruit as jam, as silver jars, canning jars, life jars, and liners were found, indicating residents canned vegetables and other foodstuffs. These artifacts suggest that the families practiced self-sufficiency and put up food seasonally, which was a collective activity. We also found poke seeds. Poke is also known as Cherokee salad because Native Americans introduced people to the early spring green. Poke salad and stewed leafy greens also have roots in the 18th century Africa, where women gathered vitamin-rich greens like kale, collards, and mustard greens to complement the livestock and game in their meals. They cooked and seasoned them with spices and pieces of meat or fish. Robert Ellison also conveyed part of his land on South Island for the construction of the Trinitarian Church. In oral histories, descendants tell stories of people traveling great distance to attend church service. As they gathered, they sang, they clapped, they filled the air with praise as they entered the door. And the church service was likely followed with a communal meal, as it was like a tradition every Saturday and Sunday morning. We would go after church and we would have a big fish fry. It's a quote from some oral history. So at the fishing village, the archaeology suggests that people utilized the land and water for hunting and gardening, gathering wild plants, fishing, crabbing, oystering, and livestock raising. They made cast nets, butchered fish and game, and prepared communal meals building on culinary traditions with roots in West African and Native American cultures. I have two more stops on this foodway tour. In 1894, President Grover Cleveland visited Georgetown to participate in the duck season and was tossed from the skiff by a strong gale of wind. The incident made the national headlines and brought Georgetown County and its fine duck hunting to the attention of the country. Northern and some local men and women purchased large tracts of land from the South Carolina planters and began managing the rice field to attract waterfowl for hunting. The rice fields were an ideal wetland habitat to attract migratory and local birds, as well as other wetland-dependent wild animals hunted for sport food. Here you can think of Hop Verity, the Santee Gun Club, or the Kinloch Gun Club. Similarly, E.P. Alexander from Georgia consolidated most of South, North, and Cat Islands as the South Island Club. And President Cleveland was frequently his guest. These hunting resorts fueled the coastal tourism industry. Visitors journeyed to the Carolina coast seeking both ready supply of fish and game and authentic Southern experience, including Southern food. Gullah Geechee men and women worked for those hunt clubs as cooks, hunt drivers, and guides. In December, my colleague, Kendi Altizer, who you'll meet next month, I think she's going to be your speaker next month, we did an archaeological survey at Cleveland's Lodge. We dug a test unit in a structure that appears to be a cellar. Most of the artifacts are stoneware sherds and canning jars, so storage containers. We're trying out a new method to get plant remains because you might have guessed there's some holes in what we know about plants, domestication, and plant use in Georgetown County, or in South Carolina in general. And so we're trying out a new method, and it seems so far in the second phase, like we have some potential, so I don't know if it's next year's topic, but we'll see. I'll let you know what we learned what's in those jars and storage containers. In the 1930s and 40s, the children of the Gullah Geechee families increasingly joined the military or migrated north to Philadelphia, New York, and Atlanta, or more locally to towns like Georgetown and Columbia as part of the Great Migration. Conservation and development limited access to traditional hunting and fishing grounds and traditional ways of life. And the forces, sorry, I got messed up in a sentence. Conservation and development limited access to traditional fishing and hunting grounds, and the forces of modernization pressured many Gullah Geechee to lose their dialect and traditional ways of life, especially after the civil rights struggles of the 1960s. But with that great migration, Gullah Geechee families took their foodways north. For example, soul food was coined during the civil rights era to represent heritage cuisines that African Americans preserved through the Great Migration. So today, our food frequently comes from grocery stores, and we often overlook the work it took to grow the tomato or catch the fish. We forget about the history and culture of our food and the ways people work together to grow or cook it. Tomatoes, or what we think of as Italian cuisine for that matter, originates in South America, along with potatoes, which were introduced to Europeans about 500 years ago. Shrimp and grits, hop and john, and other low country fare are rooted in thousands of years of indigenous history, the Columbian exchange, the transatlantic slave trade, and the plantation economy. And I'd add the Reconstruction era when African American and Gullah Geechee communities established new food traditions in freedom. So I may not have told you anything you didn't know already, but I hope it shows archaeology's potential to tell local stories. And as I've been doing through this whole presentation, I also have to point out the gaps. Despite this detailed discussion of archaeology in Georgetown, very little archaeology has been done. Most of the archaeology was done along Highway 17 for housing development, and no archaeology has been done in Georgetown's historic district. These buried sites are non-renewable resources. Once they are disturbed, the information is lost. I'm sure each of you knows one place where you think we can learn cool shit. Excuse my language. Like we can learn some new information by doing archaeology. Sorry, I wasn't Ezra and Violet there. I felt bad about her language. I know. I'm not offering to do that archaeology, but I want to encourage you two things. One, think about ways we could value archaeology in Georgetown County more. Think about the things we could learn. And two, get curious about your next meal. Much of the foods we eat are the result of complex historical processes, and archaeology has the potential to help us learn more about them. I don't know about you, but I could really eat some gumbo right now, because that's the meal with culture and history. Thank you.
Questions for Jodi?
Have you ever heard of the shell ring?
I don't know about a shell ring, but shell videos in girls.
I ran into this not and they talk about shell.
The clan mittens are located in but I don't know the shell ring.
So do you have an explanation for the shell rings down in Wallenbach?
I think that there are parts of us, like the shell rings that are, whether or not many of the shell rings is stated, but we got shell rings in Edinson, Bobby Bay, Big Island, and so, sorry, Hilton Head. So we've got, there are ceremonial feasts, right? There's where people are coming back time and time again to merge, come together for seasonal harvests, and part of rituals, like ritual spaces, because often shell rings are places where people bury their dead. Not so much shell clam mittens, right? These are meant to oysters, so I'm not sure why.
So what are shell rings?
They're just big mounds of mitten, like just like piles of shell. Like, you can see. So, and that's just nothing but clam and mussel. No oysters here, right? Like we don't have viable oysters until I say 32,000. So then you can see this is like what minnow looks like, and that's just a bigger pile with oysters added with it.
So the mitten is
It's we call them mittens like trash pit. So it's just big trash, just piles. So there's some fish bone in there too, but just basic shell.
so if there weren't oysters in the ocean, they are others.
This is not a question that I'm good at answering. There was something about the times, the ways that the sea level change between those two periods, and something would that change brought them. Sorry.
Seniors, adaptation, 2000.
But people were staying in places, 200 years ago.
3,200.
Yeah. I might have. Just, standing up here and I see this. So like we have people like hear about saying we don't have any people, like I started with archaic period, right, with hunters and gatherers, and we don't have any evidence that like paleo Indians, like people using the big who were hunted the mastodon, we don't have any evidence of them.
Some questions about gardening. You said that there's no evidence of gardening, but that in other places in the country 2,500 years ago. And how would that have been discerned through like a density of seeds? Everything's organic.
Well, one of the ways that we know about plant domestication is through caves in Arkansas, like they found bags of seed bags where people had gathered seeds to plant for next year in these dry caves. So that's one of the ways that we know about it. And then as you're doing archaeology, I didn't talk about it too much, like what our methods are, but you can find charred seeds, and people who specialize in that can tell seeds that are domesticated versus those that aren't. It's not my specialty, but it is something that people study. And so theoretically, if we did more archaeology and we collect more plant remains, where we're trying to get more plant remains, and then we do this, like you have to take. You collect dirt, like how are you going to get seeds out of dirt? It's kind of hard. And so you have to put it into water. You kind of stir it up, and the seed dries. You collect the seeds, and then you need a specialist to look at those seeds and identify them. So it's a process. So it's one of the reasons that it hasn't been done. But I didn't say it clearly enough. That's one of the things I'm advocating for, is that we need more research that does that, because our foodways is way more complicated than we think it is. And we just, I told you a bunch, but we don't. There's so much where I sat down and I read all these questions that we could answer if we did. I'm like, oh, nobody wants to hear all these questions. That's just a good exercise for me, right? But there's all this stuff that we don't know. That we could learn with more specialized analysis, because so many, not many studies have what animals that they found. So if we knew what the difference is in where people are, what kinds of fish people are eating at different times, we just learn a lot. Did I answer your question? Yes.
The excavations the picture that we put out in 1998. Are they continuing? Why?
This was done for the Intercoastal Waterway. This was done for that. Mostly of archaeology is done for federal projects. Like if you need a permit for development, and so it's not enough archaeology is done for pure research.
What was the most interesting thing you've found so far in your food? What are yours?
For food?
Yeah, for this.
Right now, I'm really excited about the cellar, and we also, I didn't say everything. There's cisterns too, and so we're just interested in what we might learn about food there. And we'll find it working with the team, we're finding the millet and the peach pits. I mean, it's just we just got we do in order to get a big look at the place, we do shovel tests every 30 or 15 meters, and we're starting to collect in each of those. We're collecting a soil sample to float to see what we can find. I'm optimistic that we might find kitchen gardens, that we might find what people are growing in, and if we're on Yawkey, we have 6 or 7 plantations. Do we see differences in what people are eating and growing across those plantations? With the Santee Delta project, we're looking at the plantations that are all along the north and south Santee rivers. If we expand that out and compare those, what do we learn about the Native American peoples and the plantations, like what people are growing? How are they different on all those plantations that I've shown you on that map? If we looked at those foodways and we looked at what people were growing there, what new information could it tell us about the ways of food distribution? Because our foodways got homogenized in the 1950s, right? We started buying everything in the grocery store. We get one variety of tomato. I mean, it really got so it got homogenized. And so if we start looking at that history, what would it tell us about the food?
How people space need for you?
Well, it depends on how big a hole you want to dig. I mean, I could put one, if we had this much space, I could put one right here. That little building I go into is maybe the size of those chairs to here.
Like you said, you had none, the story. Or somebody will really that you created their back on, would have been truth.
No. I mean, we really want to target, if we were going to do something like that, like if you knew where you might have outbuildings, if we could figure out where you might have like a kitchen in your backyard, right? Because that's where the kitchens are often like detached from the house. So if you had a kitchen or a privy, we like those too, because where that is another place where you find plant remains and like where you throw all the stuff away.
So Jodi, what is it that's preventing that kind of work? You know, is it funding?
I think it is partly money. And then there's, for people, for archaeologists, right? I mean, I think you have 2 archaeologists in Georgetown now.
Because there's great places. If you go down to Front and Cannon, there are actually, you can see the remains of what is a colonial inn. And that lot is empty. That'd be incredible. If you go to the intersection where Bethlehem is, that's where the old prison was and City Hall, where Francis Marion, there was a Revolutionary War battle in that intersection. And if you go down to Duke and King on the intersection where the Howard School originally was, and a hospital behind that, which had tremendous historical significance in the African American.
Yeah.
You got some places in town here that are
I
just
find it to be appalling that we've been, I listened just to make sure I was right about this. There's I think 5 archaeological sites reported in Georgetown, in the historic district. But nothing has been done. It's all been surface collection. Like one's the Rice Museum. There's a old tavern is reported as a site, but nothing has been done archaeologically. And I think it's about money. It's about having the resources to bring, to have a specialized person specialized to do it.
Jodi, you want to talk a little bit about some of the finds that you have on display that people can see?
Right now, Libby might have been here for last year. We talked about the fishing village, which I talked about some today, and John Doe. There's an exhibit in Maritime Museum for that. Also have a colonial exhibit at the Gullah Museum. And so if you're the African native Bay pottery, that is all colonial ceramics that were found in waterways. There's a couple of pieces from Georgetown. Most of it's from the Cooper River area, but a hobby diver and a person who likes to scuba dive and find things. He's part of the hobby diver program with the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology. So he's recorded the location of where he's found things, and he wanted them to be put on display. And so he's donated them to DNR, and we put an exhibit. So check out both of those things.
What is the latest on John Doe?
We are still working to identify him. We have a second cousin. We know his paternal line, and but we don't know who he is yet. He's got a family, which you can learn about. Come and check out the exhibit, which we know like lots of people who are related to him. And we're so close. Like we just tested 2 family members who put us a step closer, but also a step back to like that we know like that they're related to him, and we know that where they're not related to him, and so it's complicated, but maybe next year I can come back and tell you that we know who he is.
You have to do just in 30 seconds for those who may not be.
Oh, so in case you haven't heard, so and right after Hurricane Irma, a fisherman found a human skeleton eroding from South Island. He's a 16 to 18-year-old black male, and we've been working since 2021 to identify him. So we've been, doing, and we've invited people from the community to share their DNA. So we know a lot of people who are related to him. still trying to figure out what his name is. How old? 16. Oh, he died between 1890 and 30. His clothing looks like he was about 1890, but his radiocarbon base says 1999. Radiocarbon is more complicated as you get closer to the present, so it could be 1929, but it could be.
What would you take for you sort of clay aberrations as well?
That is one of our questions that we are thinking about now. There's some clay sources on the Santee, and that second archaeologist is a sort that he's just got here, doesn't know anything about Georgetown or South Carolina archaeology. He knows soil, and so we want to look at some clay sources, and we also want to look at pottery and bricks and see if we can source some of those things. And we also want to look at the rice fields and see if that's possible to do rice. No, I don't know. It's one of those things that people haven't done work on. There's a whole complicated stuff pottery that I could do by yourself, but none of these other people talk about. Maybe one or two people like, but
Jodi, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting yourself for next year. I love this. It's great. I have several speakers like that. I'm just thrilled to be able to have them come back. I do want to mention, let me give you another interesting and beautiful connection with Jonathan Green, whose artwork I hope you are familiar with. As we were preparing to have the grand opening here, we were in contact with Jonathan. We wanted to purchase one of his prints to be able to display, and he graciously donated the print. And we framed it, and you'll find it if you go out to the front desk and look behind the front desk. It's a beautiful Jonathan Green piece of art. A print that he donated to us here at Georgetown Library. He has a lot of close connections with our staff here, and is a good friend of the Georgetown Library. So please note that. That's a wonderful connection. Thanks, Jodi, for that. As she also mentioned and announced next month, we'll just work for a theme in February of Black History Month to do something particularly here during, again, the African American slave African community here in Georgetown. And what we have chosen is, again, by recommendation of Jodi Holtizer, another archaeologist, will be with us here next month. She's been working in the Santee Delta. And the title of her presentation is The Most Inhospitable Environments in Slave Life in the Rice Fields of the Santee Delta. We often talk about, or hear about, how challenging, how difficult, how impossible life was for the enslaved Africans. And she has done archaeological work which demonstrates and proves that. And she's going to be coming next month, February 18th. I got the date right, the third Tuesday at 10 o'clock, and she'll be sharing with us at that time. Anything else, Jodi, I should mention about her? Tremendous background. Jodi recommended her to us and got in contact, and she again graciously agreed to come.
She's one of the founders of the Santee Delta Project, which includes Richard Porcher, you probably know, his rice field research. Herb Frazier, oral historian, Charleston. So it's an important project.
So we're really looking forward to having her here with us next month, and I hope you'll come back and join us. We also have a number of regular events on our schedule. I should mention that if you're interested, if you're not on our email list, we regularly send out emails about our upcoming events, mentioning opportunities for volunteer service if you're interested. But we also include what are some of the other nonprofit organizations in Georgetown that don't get enough publicity, and we try to get the word out as to what's happening and encourage you to participate in those events. But for us, there's several coming up, two in February and one in March. I just want to mention in February, on the 12th of February, we do an annual pilgrimage to Columbia to raise funds for the library. We go and we visit our legislative representatives from both Georgetown as well as Horry County, pay a visit to them at their offices. Dwight, they all usually arrives and with cookies. I think that's allowed under state law. But we do go and visit and talk about what we're doing here at the library and try to encourage and like to take along a group of friends. You'll be getting a notice on that by email on February 12th. It's just a nice time together, a fellowship, and a group of us who go up. Dwight also, he hasn't told me this yet, but Dwight's going to treat us to lunch. Dwight's going to treat us to lunch. So anybody would like to join us, leave early in the morning, get back by mid-afternoon or so. The other thing is we have an annual meeting of the Friends on February 25th. That's a Tuesday as well, and that gives us an opportunity to be able to talk in what is our due diligence of our finances, of our plans for the future, of what's been accomplished this year. And we hope that you'll come and join us on February 25th. That's sort of the stick, the carrot, is we always have a speaker who comes, and we're really pleased this year to have Nick Robinson going to be coming and speaking. Nick was just recently elected the chair of the board of the Kaminsky House Museum. And he's going to be coming and speaking a little bit on some of the small trivial kinds of things about the history of the Kaminsky House. So I hope you'll come and join us for the business meeting and the carrot, which is Nick's presentation on the Kaminsky House. And then finally, our last event coming up this winter and this beginning of spring is our annual spring community yard sale, an opportunity to be able to sell those things you're planning to get rid of at your house. And we do it right here at the library in the parking lot behind us, very successful, usually 25 to 30 vendors, people who want to sell their things. Good turnout, great advertising. Instead of having to have it at your home, we have it here. And if you'd like to participate in that, that's going to be on Saturday, March 15th, with rain date on March 22nd. Several of you have asked me about updates on our projects we've been doing during the construction, which is the construction and renovation projects. Two projects we've been working on. One is landscape. We're very pleased to announce that we have reached our goal of $25,000 to cover the expenses of landscaping. The Friends of the Library sponsored what is a section along Church Street, Route 17, and around to the back. And we're really happy with the fact that back in December we completed the funding for that at $25,000. We have another major project, which is really very special to us, very special to our hearts and to Georgetown, and that is the one right here, Whispers of My Ancestors. It is a statue that is being presented for our children's library section on James Foley, who was the president here of Georgetown, and the grandnephew of Harriet Tubman. And this statue we're putting together as a special inspiration and encouragement to our children and young people. He was here at Georgetown. It's a long story. I won't take the time to do that today. But a beautiful and wonderful story. Our original goal was $40,000 for two things. One is inflation has hit us, which is hitting everything. But the other part was we recognized we also need to raise funds for the staging of it, as it were, stand, context in which it's placed. And so we're really now raising $60,000. We're very pleased to announce we're at the $49,000 point on that of individual contributions. That has been a wonderful process to see that. And we would really like to finish that up this year, 2025, as well as to be able to present the statue sometime, hopefully summer, early fall. We'll keep you all informed of that. If you'd like to contribute to that donation, lead out to the Friends of the Georgetown Library, and we'll be able to contribute toward that project. Please. I think that's all my announcements. Is there? Yes, Dan? Yes, please.
We do have one last thing.
Yes, please do that.
We had got a generous grant, LSTA grant from the Institute for Museums and Library Services in conjunction with the South Carolina State Library. And we can offer a little additional programming this winter and spring. It's called Shared Traditions, the Profound Enrichment of American Life Through African American Cultural Experiences. So if you're not joining Bob, we encourage you very much to do this on Wednesday, February 12th with those cookies and helping us out in Columbia that day. We have a very special treat here. We kick off Shared Traditions. There'll be Wednesdays at 4 p.m. right here in the auditorium. Ron Days will be presenting Gullah literature. He'll be doing a dramatic reading, performance, singing. He's got a beautiful voice. And we'll just keep going with that. We'll have the Plantation Singers the next week beautiful a cappella group doing low country spirituals, and then we'll have a performance theater after that. But it'll keep going mainly Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Throughout the spring. So
Great show. Thank you, Neil.
thank you for supporting this as well. So I have some flyers here.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for being here today and braving the cold.